Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025, and our friend Professor Marandi is back with us. Welcome back, Professor.
Thank you very much, as always, Nima.
Let's get started with the meeting between Netanyahu and Donald Trump and the way that they're trying to manage, or in their mind, they're trying to manage the situation in the Middle East. Here is what Donald Trump said about the situation in the Middle East.
I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell. And those people will now be able to live in peace. We'll make sure that it's done world class. It'll be wonderful for the people. Palestinians mostly we're talking about. And I have a feeling that despite them saying no, I have a feeling that the king in Jordan and that the general president, but that the general in Egypt will open their hearts and will give us the kind of land that we need to get this done. And people can live in harmony and in peace.
Do we know what is he talking about?
Well, I don't think he even remembered the name of the general. I think he was alluding to Sisi, the president of Egypt. I don't think we should take anything that he says very seriously. After all, at the end of the day, the reason why people in Gaza are living in hell is because of the United States. The United States has been providing all the weapons and the ammunition and the money for the Israeli regime to carry out this genocide. And Trump has been very much on board. True, it was Biden who was in charge at that time, but Trump throughout this period was supporting the Israeli regime. So he's just as much a part of this Holocaust as anyone else. And obviously, nothing is going to happen. The Palestinians, they remain steadfast after 16 months of genocide and slaughter, and they refuse to leave their land. So how is Trump going to convince them to leave? Is he going to drop more bunker busters? We're going to have the same as we had before. So it really it's not going to have an impact. What it does actually is that it weakens the regimes in this region that are in the American camp, because the populations in the different countries, whether it's in Egypt or Jordan or Saudi or the Emirates or Turkey, they're going to constantly be asking themselves, is my government doing a deal behind our backs? Or is our government going to sell out the Palestinians in an even bigger way than before? So what Trump is doing is he's raising questions about all these governments, since he's saying they're all supported, they'll all back it. And even when the government say, no, we have nothing to do with it, people are still going to be asking questions. So he's not doing a service to any of the U.S. allies in the region. And ultimately, that doesn't help the Israeli regime either.
Here is, many people are asking what would be the main plan on the part of Donald Trump. And I think the key would be what Smotrich said, that the plan presented yesterday by President Trump is the true answer to October 7th. Whoever committed the most terrible massacre on our land will find himself losing his land forever. Yeah, this shows what would be the plan. They're going to send these people to Egypt and Jordan, and they're going to rebuild it and give it to the settlers. I think the only solution that is in the mind of Donald Trump is that. How is that going to play out for the Palestinian people? We know that he said, on the other hand, Donald Trump said that Saudi Arabia is not objecting on sending these people to these two countries. But Saudi Arabia, right after that, sent a letter the foreign ministry of Saudi Arabia, that they're not changing their position on having a Palestinian state?
Well, again, he's not doing Saudi Arabia any favors by claiming that the Saudis will be on board, because even when the Saudis put out a statement, people are going to start questioning whether they're honest or not. It doesn't matter what the Saudis think or even do when the United States is telling the people of the region that no, whatever they say or do, they really mean something else. And so he is undermining the stability of, again, his own allies. We don't have to go over October the 7th because you have a very politically aware audience. This did not begin in October the 7th. The ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians began well over 70 years ago, and they've been expelled from their own territory. And Gaza is, of course, where the refugees from Palestine were expelled to. It's been a concentration camp for decades. Slaughter after slaughter took place there until we got to October the 7th. So we'll just put that aside. But the important thing, I think, is that this was the Israeli plan all along. And they want to annex Gaza, but also the West Bank. The West Bank has nothing to do with Gaza. Yet we see right now that they are beginning major assaults in the West Bank. Places like Jenin have been put under a great deal of pressure. A lot of people have been killed, and they've been destroying houses and property. When you look at the footage, it reminds you of Gaza. It's sort of like Gaza light, and it's happening across the West Bank. So, and the Western media is silent about it. The objective of the Israeli regime has always been annexation. It's been going on for decades. You have 800,000 people at least right now in the West Bank, and it has just been increasing year by year for decades. So no one can pin the blame on the Palestinian people for what the Israeli regime is doing. It's clear as day. But the Western media, Western diplomats, Western governments, they've never been honest before. We shouldn't expect them to be honest now. So while many in Western media will ridicule Trump for what he says, they ridicule him because they hate Trump, the mainstream media. But what Trump is saying is basically what the Democrats, what Biden, what Obama and others were doing, what Clinton, what they were doing. It's the gradual annexation of Palestinian territory, the gradual strangulation of the Palestinian people, whether it's in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, or whether it's in the Golan in Syrian territory, or whether it's in the 1967 territories. The good thing about Trump is that he says the quiet part out loud. And I think that is actually positive. I think what happened last night is good for the resistance. It's good for those who are standing against the Israeli regime, because the hypocrisy is gone.
Do you see any sort of lack of unity in the Muslim world in order to respond to to this behavior on the part of the United States? Because the way they're talking about Gaza, it seems that they're talking about a small village that they can remove the people and nobody would care about them in the Muslim world, in the Arab states. Is that, are we missing some sort of unity in the Muslim world?
Well, there are two problems here. One is unity is not important if there's no action. I'm here at a conference in Moscow, and one of our mutual friends is actually sitting right across me, who you'll see a few minutes later. But a couple of the guests from different countries were saying how their governments were condemning what Trump said or opposing what Trump said. And I said in the session that these are just empty words. No one cares about statements made by the government of Turkey or Jordan or Egypt or Saudi or Iran or anyone for that matter. It doesn't matter. These statements don't have any impact. At the end of the day, the only thing that will make a difference is that if the unity that you speak of moves through unity, they take action. And again, someone today from Jordan was very upset with me that why does Iran support Hamas, and why does it support Islamic Jihad and Ansar Allah in Yemen and Hezbollah? And I said to him, I said in the conference, I said the only way forward is resistance. In this unity, if it moves in a direction where Turkey stops selling oil, where Azerbaijan, the Republic of Azerbaijan, stops selling oil, where Jordan cuts off relations with, where Turkey and Egypt also cut off relations with the Emirates, that unity will have a huge impact. It will have an enormous impact. Even if one of these countries took a clear-cut action against the Israeli regime, that would have a major impact. If Turkey stopped selling oil, if they really sincerely stopped trade, Mr. Erdogan, if they broke off relations, that would have a huge impact. And if they did it collectively, then I think the regime would really be brought to its knees. But the unity where they make statements, I think the Israelis laugh at them when they do that.
How do you find the situation in Lebanon right now, in southern Lebanon? I talked with Laith Marouf in Lebanon. He was reporting that the people are getting back to the southern part of Lebanon, that they're trying to force Israelis to get out of that region. Is that going to be, and on the other hand, what was important, the important point he made was that the government is not that much different from Hezbollah when it comes to the southern Lebanon. Do you think that the government can work with Hezbollah in order to avoid the future attack, any sort of invasion on the part of Israelis?
Well, the government in Lebanon has to play a role, but at the end of the day, that which keeps the Israeli regime out of Lebanon is the resistance. Have no doubt about that. The Lebanese army is not capable of defending Lebanon. It's not because the soldiers are not good. It's because the United States will simply not allow Lebanon to have a capable military defense. The Israelis were bombing cities and apartment blocks day and night in Lebanon, and the country has no air defenses. It has no missile defense capabilities. It has no means to retaliate. So when you have such a military, the Israelis can do whatever they want. What happened was that Hezbollah kept the regime at bay, and the after the ceasefire, the regime took advantage of the ceasefire and started making inroads into villages in southern Lebanon. And what the people did was that through people power, they went and pushed them out of most of those territories. And the Israelis slaughtered ordinary people, I think including 6 women and a child just a week ago. And there were some really iconic images that if these images were of anyone but Lebanese women of the resistance, they would have been all over the social media. You had a woman standing in front of an Israeli tank who apparently was injured, and she remained steadfast. And there was another woman, they were shooting at her, Israeli soldiers, but she stood her ground and told them to leave and go back to their home countries. And so through giving, so this was led by women. In the West, they pretend to support women and women's rights, which is all fake. But these women courageously led this movement to liberate southern Lebanon. So ultimately, whether it's the military resistance or whether it's people power, it is the resistance, it is the people of Lebanon that defeated the regime and was able to retake this territory and prevent the regime from taking southern Lebanon. And this, Nima, is really important because a few weeks ago, if you recall, the Western media was full of these foolish statements that the resistance has been defeated and it's significantly weakened. Well, now let's look at what's happened. In Lebanon, the Israeli regime has lost almost everything. In Gaza, they've lost. And by the way, what Trump did last night also is significant in a different way. The United States under Obama signed a nuclear deal with Iran. Obama failed to abide by his commitments, and then Trump tore up the deal. Then we later learned that Merkel and Hollande, both of them said that we never took the Minsk Accord seriously. We were using it as an opportunity to help Ukraine. Now, this agreement for the ceasefire in Gaza, we see that Trump does not want to implement the third phase. This was an agreement that was basically brought into play because of Trump. The agreement was signed, or this was agreed upon the day before he became president. So, what does that say? It means that the United States is not a regime that you can negotiate with. If you sign a nuclear deal, they will not abide by their commitments. They'll tear up the deal. If you sign an agreement, Minsk 1, Minsk 2, if you sign a ceasefire deal, they will not, they're not trustworthy. So in future, if Trump wants to negotiate with Iran over the nuclear program, why should Iran have any faith in his commitments? If he wants to negotiate with the Russians over Ukraine, why should the Russians believe anything that he says? And I think in this sense, Trump has damaged the United States in a very big way. But in any case, the resistance in Gaza, victorious. In Lebanon, victorious. And Syria, we're seeing right now, as we were talking about in previous sessions that we had together, the situation is not looking good for those who took the country. The country is falling apart, and it's become a black hole, and it's increasingly, at least, becoming a black hole for Turkey and for Qatar and for all those who are supporting these remnants of ISIS and these Al Qaeda people who are under different names. So I'm actually, even though I think that we are living in very tough times, and this year will probably be a very tough year, I don't see things going well for the West or for the Israeli regime.
Do you think that the situation in the West Bank and Mahmoud Abbas would help them in Gaza? And how do they have any sort of leverage on Gazans? I'm talking about the PA.
No, no. The PA has no means of taking over in Gaza. The Israeli regime tried for 16 months. Trump will not be able to do it. Who is the PA to be able to root out the resistance in Gaza? The PA is the Israeli jailer in the West Bank. They're helping the Israelis in their offensives in Jenin and elsewhere. It's very pathetic, the behavior of the PA. These are corrupted people. They are people who the Israelis and the Western NGOs and others have been funding for years. Whenever you receive this sort of funding for yourselves, for your families, it's going to impact the way in which you behave. And they've been able to corrupt these people, many of whom decades ago were resistance fighters. So it's very sad. If you go back 40 years ago, some of these people were very different from what they are today. But in any case, they're corrupted, but they have no legitimacy. If elections are held today, we saw the polling that was done in the West Bank, let alone Gaza. In the West Bank, the PA would lose in a big way. Hamas would be number one, and the other groups would come after Hamas. So I don't see any way in which the PA would be able to undermine the resistance in Gaza.
I would wonder who's picturing the situation in the Middle East for Donald Trump, because when he was talking about the Ukrainian conflict, said that Russia is losing more than Ukrainians, a million people. They have lost 1 million soldiers in the conflict, while Ukrainian is 700,000. Here comes the question that the picture is distorted totally, and the main problem, if I were Donald Trump and I was thinking about the situation in the Middle East, I would think of Yemen, Hezbollah, and Hamas. But he's not talking about any of these parties that were resisting the Antony Blinken's plan to remove people from Gaza. Do you think that in his grand plan, does he have any sort of strategy dealing with these people, with this party?
Well, we don't know whether he's getting accurate information or he's just uh, receiving inaccurate information. For example, in Ukraine, we know that the casualty figures for Ukraine are much higher than Russia. Maybe he knows that, but he's just simply repeating the narrative because he is now the establishment. Or maybe he's using this to appease the establishment to make some different sort of move later on. It's difficult to say. I mean, after what we saw last night, how can we interpret Trump? Because he's just all over the place. So nothing that he says can be taken seriously, whether it's on Ukraine, whether it's on Gaza or the resistance or elsewhere. I don't think he has a grand strategy, just like I do not believe at all for a minute that that anyone takes what he says about Gaza seriously.
Is Donald Trump going to make the situation or the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia?
Well,
Is
Iran and
that is that the question is this: is he gonna influence the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and how is that going to play out for the situation for Gazans?
well, I'm sure Trump will try to uh, create divisions in the region, as the United States always does. But there are a couple of things here. One is that Trump does not have any card up his sleeve that Biden didn't have. There's nothing new in the United States. He doesn't have some secret weapon that didn't exist before that he could, use to create a new situation in our region. And in fact, as I said earlier, the way in which he's speaking about Saudi Arabia and saying, no, the Saudis are with us on this. He's not doing any good for the Saudis. Uh, he's not doing them a service. I think that I can't say for certain, but I think that with what's going on in Syria and with the behavior of Trump, I think Saudi Arabia would probably be thinking more seriously about cooperating with Iran more today than before, because Saudi Arabia is worried about Syria. It's worried about what Qatar and Turkey and others are doing in that country. And it is also worried about how Trump is playing with their image and credibility. So if I was Saudi Arabia, I would try to be thinking of Iran as helping me to balance in the region.
Many people believe that Netanyahu was trying to convince Donald Trump in order to let them to attack Iranian nuclear facilities. If that happens, if Donald Trump says, go ahead and do it, what would be the reaction on the part of Iranians?
Well, Netanyahu does not have the capability to do serious damage to Iran's nuclear facilities. They are deep underground, they're very well protected, and the Iranian response would be massive. They would be on the losing end. I think that's clear. It would actually, it would cause some damage, but it would actually give Iran the opportunity to hit the Israeli regime very hard, and a good excuse to do so. No one can complain about it. So Iran, I'm sure, would make have a field day just firing missiles at the Israeli regime. If the United States got involved, that would be a different story. And as you've seen, the Iranians just recently, they've shown 2 new underground missile cities, one in the Persian Gulf region and another one on the mainland. Iran has these missile bases all over the country, and they've been created to defend the country, not against the Israeli regime. They're not a threat, but against the United States. And all these, small, tiny regimes in the Persian Gulf, oil and gas regimes, they're a bunch of glass palaces and mansions and castles. And if there's fighting, all of that will fall. And that would mean the global oil and gas market, the prices would go through the roof, and that would bring down the global economy. That's not a scenario that Trump wants. So I find it highly unlikely that he'll move in that direction.
Yeah. Just to wrap up this session, show your friend there and my friend. Yeah, here is Pepe.
Hello, everybody. So this is the backstage at the Valdai. I would not miss it for a world because this guy is here. And now we're going to cross Moscow to go to the other side. Bye, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you, Professor Marandi, for being with us today.
Have a very good day.
Great pleasure as always. See you soon.
Bye
Bye-bye.
for now.
Bye-bye.